And next, recognition of the fact that every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent benefit, and temporary defeat is not failure until it has been accepted as such. Do you know where the majority of people fall down in connection with their application of their faith? It's when they're defeated, and they accept that defeat as being something they can't do anything about. Instead of beginning immediately to search for that seed of an equivalent benefit that's in every defeat, they become moody and broody. They become discouraged. They build up inferiority complexes instead of reversing that order and using that defeat as nothing more than temporary and making another effort. And next, the habit of affirming one's definite major purpose in the form of a prayer at least once daily. Now, the subconscious mind only knows what you tell it, or what you allow other people to tell it, or what you allow the circumstances of life to tell it. And it doesn't know the difference between a lie and the truth. It doesn't know the difference between a penny and $1 million. It accepts the things that you send over. And if you send over a predominating thoughts on poverty and ill health and failure, that's exactly what you'll get. No matter how much faith that you may have later on, you find out that the subconscious responds to the mental attitude that you're maintaining during the day. And it's necessary for you to affirm over and over again the objects that you are going to attain in life until you educate your subconscious mind to attract automatically to you the things that are related to what you're aiming to attain in life. You'll find that your mind is like an electromagnet. And once you charge it with a clear picture of what you want, it'll attract to you from the highways and the byways the things that you need to carry out that purpose. And next, recognition of the existence of infinite intelligence that gives originalness to the entire universe. That the individual, you that is a minute expression of this intelligence. And as such, you, the individual, your mind has no limitations except those accepted or set up in your own mind. Your mind has no limitations whatsoever, except those that you allow to be established there or that you deliberately set up in your own mind or accept. Now that's a pretty broad statement, isn't it? But the achievements of men like Mr. Edison and Mr. Ford and Mr. Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, if you please, certainly definitely supports the idea that there is no limitation except that which you set up in your own mind. And if I had ever wavered for 1 second, from the time that I started with Mr. Carnegie up until the time I gave this philosophy to the world, if I had wavered 1 second in my belief that I would do it, I would never have done it. How did I happen to do it? Do you have any idea what played the strongest part in what I've achieved? It wasn't my brilliancy. It wasn't my outstanding intelligence. I have no more brilliancy than the average person, and no more intelligence than the average person. But there was something in there that was responsible for it.
Having a definite faith in you.
Grand. In other words, I believed I could do it, and I never stopped believing it. The harder the going was, the more I believed I would do it. And I want to tell you that if you can take that attitude toward yourself, if you can throw yourself over on the side of yourself, so to speak, when you're overtaken by adversity, when people are against you, if you can do that, if you can stand by and not also go over against yourself, then you're using applied faith. And you've got to do that. Do you know there are testing times for people? Had you ever thought of that? Nobody is permitted to attain high state in life and stay there without being tested. Any more than anybody is allowed to go into a well-managed business and go up to a high position and stay there without he's been tested with lower positions step by step until he earns the right to be up to the top. I don't know how the Creator runs his business entirely, but I can see I can catch a pretty good idea of how he does it from observing that part which I can understand. Of course, there's much more that I can't understand. But I can see definitely that he allows nobody to attain to a high estate in life without giving him severe testings. And one of the most astounding things that I found in my research was that the men of great achievement in all walks of life, back down through the ages, were great only in proportion as they had been defeated and as they had met with opposition. Now that's an astounding thing. It couldn't have been a coincidence that every one of these outstanding men was great in proportion exactly as he had been small and as he had been opposed and as he had had to struggle. I used to tell of my early struggles and tell of some of my defeats. My business management got after me about it and said it wasn't a good idea. I still think it's a good idea. I think it's a fine idea, because if you only knew the amount of major defeats that I've met with and still kept my head above water and still lived to deliver this philosophy, you'd say that if Hill can do it, I can do it too. And that was the only reason, of course, that I ever spoke of it. The habit of affirming one's definite major purpose in the form of a prayer at least daily, and the recognition of infinite intelligence. I don't mind what terms you use. You can call that God, or you can call it Jehovah, or you can call it Buddha, or you can call it Muhammad. Anything you want to. No matter what you call it, we're all talking about the first cause. There isn't two first causes. There's only one. There couldn't be two. There's one first cause that's responsible for this great universe we're living in, for you and for me and for everything that's in the universe. I call it infinite intelligence because I have students of all faiths and all religions all over the world as my students. And the infinite intelligence happens to be a sort of a neutral in-between term that nobody can object to. Nobody at all. But unless you not only believe in that, unless you can prove to yourself, unless you can absolutely put down on paper evidence that there is a first cause that you can draw on, why then you are not going to be able to make the fullest use of applied faith. One of my students asked me one day about my concept of God, about my concept of infinite intelligence, and if I meant the same thing as God. I said, why, yes, I do. Well, he said, can you prove the existence of your concept of God? I said, why, everything in the universe is the finest of evidence of the existence of it, because of the orderliness of the universe. Everything's orderly, from the electrons and protons of the smallest part of matter on up to the largest suns that float through the heavens. Everything's in orderliness. No chaos, no running together of the planets. Why, there's more evidence of a first cause than there is of anything that I know of. And if you don't believe that, if you don't accept it, if you don't see it, if you don't feel it, if you don't know that, then you won't know that you are a minute part of that infinite intelligence expressing through your brain. And if you once recognize that, then you recognize the truth of what I said, that your only limitations are those which you set up in your own mind or permit somebody to set up there or circumstances to establish for you. Next, careful inventory of your past defeats and adversities, from which it becomes obvious that all such experiences do carry the seed of an equivalent benefit. Now, just to hear me say that every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent benefit, that every defeat, every failure carries with it the seed of an equivalent benefit, wouldn't mean a thing in the world to you, unless I made application of it and gave you illustration after illustration, and unless you examine enough illustrations in your own experience to see that it always works out that way. That's why I want you to examine these adversities that come to you. Do you know that oftentimes your adversities are your greatest blessings? Do you have any idea the greatest blessing that ever came into my life? Those of you who know considerable about me, would you have any idea what it is? Of course, it was the loss of my mother. And ordinarily you would say that would be the greatest catastrophe that could overtake a child, would be to lose his mother at the age of 9 years. Why do I say that was the greatest blessing? Because it brought me a new mother to take her place that's been responsible for everything that I've achieved, everything that I shall achieve. Very largely responsible, at least. And without her influence, I'd still be up there fighting rattlesnakes, drinking mountain liquor, and fighting feuds. Where my relatives still are doing that same thing. No reason to expect that I wouldn't be. I've had a lot of other adversities. And I want to tell you that without some 20 major adversities I've gone through with, I would never have been able to approve the soundness of this philosophy, and that there is the seed of an equivalent benefit in every adversity. Can you imagine any worse adversity coming to a man than to walk down to the hospital and to be informed that his son was born without any sign of ears, and that he would be a deaf and dumb mute all of his life? Can you imagine any worse adversity than that? I will always be thankful that that happened, because by my contact with infinite intelligence, he was improvised with a hearing system of some sort that gave him 65% of his normal hearing, and with a hearing aid, 100%. He's learned to live a normal life, and I got the greatest demonstration of my entire experience of the power of faith. I couldn't have gotten it any other way. I couldn't have gotten it secondhand. I had to get it firsthand. I never accepted that affliction of that child, not even before I saw him, not even after I saw him. I never accepted it. His relatives accepted it. They wanted to put him in the school of underprivileged where he learned the sign language, learned lip reading. I didn't want him to know there were such things. And when he got up to where he was old enough to go to school, I had a fight with the school authorities every year, just as regular as the time came around. They wanted to send him over to school for underprivileged children, where he'd mix with the other children and see that there were afflictions. I didn't want him to know there were such things. And I taught him from the very beginning that his not having any ears was a great blessing. And he believed it. And it turned out to be, because people took compassion on him. They did things for him they wouldn't have done otherwise. He got a job as a salesman for the Saturday Evening Post, and he led every salesman throughout the United States. Oftentimes he'd go out with $5 worth of merchandise and come back with $10 in cash. He did that many times. People would look at him and say, well, that poor little fellow, no ears, out selling papers. I guess his parents are poor. Give him a dollar bill, and instead of giving him back 95 cents, they'd say, oh, just Sonny, you just keep that. And very often he'd get $1 apiece for Saturday Evening Post. Not at all conscious today of any affliction. He's living a perfectly normal life because I taught him that an affliction, any kind of an affliction, can be transmuted into a benefit. Now that's an astounding thing, isn't it, to consider that that is true. But it is true. Now, as I said, you're just hearing me say that won't mean a thing in the world unless you begin to look around in your own experiences, take inventory, and watch what happens in the future. There'll be things happen to you in the future that are unpleasant, and maybe some to me too. But I tell you what I'm going to do when anything unpleasant happens to me. I'm going to immediately transmute it into something pleasant. Immediately. And then I'm still talking about the fundamentals of faith. Self-respect expressed through harmony with one's own conscience is certainly an important factor in applied faith. Self-respect expressed through harmony with one's own conscience. Isn't it a marvelous thing that the Creator set up in everybody a judge advocate that tells you the right thing and the wrong thing? You don't have to ask anybody. Isn't that a marvelous thing? You don't have to ask anybody what's right or wrong. Your own conscience tells you. Unless you convert it into a conspirator instead of a cooperator by choking it off and not responding to it, as so many people do. Your conscience can be not only a guide, but it can also be corrupted to where it's a conspirator. It'll help you cover up your meanness. And a lot of people use it for just that purpose, too. Believe me, they have it choked off. If that weren't true, there couldn't be so many brutes loose in the world today, concocting plans for starting bigger and better wars. They have no conscience. They've killed off the conscience. That conscience is a marvelous thing. And next, to create a mental attitude favorable for the expression of faith. Now, here's what you do. First of all, know what you want and determine what you have to give in return for it. Know what you want in life. And I mean not only in your major purpose, but in your minor purposes. What kind of a house you want to live in? What kind of a car you want to drive? What kind of a wardrobe you want? What kind of an education you want your children to have? What kind of a present you're going to buy your wife for a birthday? And you better be sure to buy her one every time if you're going to keep on good terms with her. What kind of a cake are you going to bake for your husband on his birthday? And you better make it a good one. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, married ladies and gentlemen in particular, did you know it's not the big things in the relationship between a man and his wife that counts, but it's the little niceties, the little things that count. Well, it's the little niceties, the little things that my wife cooks up for me. Now, I don't mean in food, but the little parties, the little visits, the trips that she cooks up for me when I'm home. They don't amount to so much in one way, and yet another way they're very sentimental, and keeps that relationship alive that we had before we were married. We're still courting each other. I think I do more of a courting job now than I did before, because after all, I not only got her, I have to keep her. That's important. Well, we have a lot of fun with these off-the-cuff remarks. Not that you don't find any of that in the notes at all, but but I just know that these are very super intimate things that make joy in my life would be just as acceptable in your life too. I know it's the little things in your life that make the difference between the happiness and unhappiness.